Sony recently said they're about to stop physical game disc production. Starting in January 2028, every new PlayStation game will strictly release as a digital license. They are even putting warning labels directly on console boxes to notify buyers. The charm of sharing your favorite game disc with your friend is being taken away by the exact same company that built its entire reputation on physical media. If you remember E3 2013, Sony won over millions of players by openly mocking Microsoft's restrictive digital copyright plans. They handed a physical game disc to a colleague on stage in a viral video, calling physical sharing the official standard for PlayStation. I have always been a fan of Xbox 360. It was peak Microsoft. But with Xbox One, Microsoft wanted to ruin ownership. The gamers rightfully screamed back, and they were defeated. 13 years later, Sony's consumer-friendly mask has completely fallen off. Sony realized that as long as physical media exists in stores, consumers retain real control over their purchases. When you buy a physical disc, you hold a tangible product in your hands. You can lend it to a friend, trade it in at a local shop, or sell it on the second-hand market when you finish playing. More importantly, that disc works offline without asking permission from a remote server. A physical game belongs to you, completely isolated from corporate policy changes. Digital distribution strips every single one of those fundamental rights away. You do not actually buy a game on the PlayStation Store. You pay $70 for a temporary license to access data hosted on Sony servers. That license can be modified, restricted, or revoked whenever corporate leadership decides to alter their legal contracts. Yet, corporate defenders constantly flood forums with ridiculous excuses to justify this outright theft. You will see fanboys argue that everyone has an internet connection today, asking what the point of a physical disc even is. That completely misses the fundamental issue of consumer ownership. I pay my hard-earned money to buy a single-player video game. Why the hell do I need an active internet connection to verify that I own that game? If I buy an offline single-player experience, forcing an online check-in is purely an anti-consumer leash designed for control and data tracking. It ensures Sony can just shut down a server 2 weeks from now and lock you out of a product you already paid for. Then you have the people claiming that modern games are simply too large to fit on discs. This is a complete lie spread by greedy publishers. Ultra HD Blu-ray discs easily hold up to 100 gigabytes of data. Multi-disc releases exist right now to solve any data limits. Games like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth proved that putting massive games on discs is entirely possible. The only reason a game does not fit on a disc is when publishers are incredibly cheap. They refuse to pay for a second disc and use day one patches as a crutch to rush incomplete software to store shelves. Another pathetic excuse is that physical discs get damaged or scratched after extended use. Modern Blu-ray discs are manufactured with hard-coat protective layers specifically designed to resist scratches and natural degradation. A physical disc sitting on a shelf will easily outlive corporate server nodes. Sony will inevitably shut those servers down when a console generation becomes unprofitable. These community arguments are not actual logic. They are corporate excuses regurgitated by fanboys to justify losing basic consumer rights. Think about the reality of buying any other physical product. When you buy a car, ownership completely transfers to you. You have the absolute legal and moral right to let your friend borrow that car for a week. The car manufacturer does not get to park outside your house and dictate who is allowed in the driver's seat. If I buy a video game, I want to give it to my friend so he can play over the weekend and return it to me the following week. Who gives Sony the authority to instruct me that I am not allowed to do that? They have absolutely zero right to dictate what you do with a product you paid cash for. Sony wants to take away physical media and demand online validation for offline games. They are not doing this to improve user convenience. They are converting permanent ownership into a revocable rental scheme. We have already seen Sony remove hundreds of purchased digital movies and TV shows from user accounts without offering full refunds. They attempted to shut down digital storefronts for older platforms like the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Vita without offering alternative access methods. When a digital storefront goes offline, every single uninstalled game locked to that network becomes inaccessible. If your console storage fails, your paid library vanishes instantly. By forcing an all-digital future, Sony secures an absolute monopoly over the entire PlayStation software ecosystem. They eliminate all price competition from retail outlets. Third-party distributors and used game markets are wiped out overnight. Retailers like Walmart and local independent game shops will no longer be able to discount physical stock market. Competition dies completely the moment a single corporate entity holds exclusive control over the hardware. Sony gets to decide that a 5-year-old release remains locked at full price forever. If you want to play that game, you pay their exact price tag or you simply do not play at all. There is no pre-owned market to offer you a discount. This is a calculated corporate strategy designed to extract maximum revenue and strip away your buyer autonomy. Sony executives know exactly what they are doing. They openly indicate to investors that high digital profit margins outweigh temporary customer dissatisfaction. They know players will voice anger online. They also know that players will have no alternative options once disk drives are erased from future console builds. This level of centralized control gives platform holders destructive power over video game preservation. A publisher might decide to delist a title due to expiring music licenses, car brand permits, or corporate tax write-offs. When they do, that game disappears from history. If a digital-only title gets pulled from the storefront, it ceases to exist for new players. Nobody can buy it, nobody can download it, and future generations will never be able to experience that piece of interactive media. Modern publishers actively engineer software with intentional expiration dates. They want players to view video games as disposable temporary service subscriptions rather than permanent creative works. Corporations do not want you playing 10-year-old titles that you paid for long ago. They want you constantly paying for continuous microtransactions, seasonal battle passes, and full-priced digital remasters. This systematic hostility toward game preservation makes emulation vital for the future of gaming. For years, major publishers have spent millions trying to label emulation as simple theft. They launch aggressive lawsuits against emulator developers and attempt to frame open-source software projects as illegal threats. The reality is that community emulation is the primary reason vast eras of gaming history survive today. When a corporation abandons its legacy hardware, terminates online infrastructure, and pulls titles from digital storefronts, community preservationists save the media. Emulation decouples software from fragile proprietary hardware, allowing it to run natively on open computer systems maintained by people who genuinely value game history. Without independent emulation efforts, thousands of classic games would be completely erased. Sony claims to respect their brand heritage while simultaneously locking legacy games behind expensive cloud streaming subscriptions. Many of those streamed titles suffer from severe input delay, heavy video compression, and sudden server disconnections. As Sony completely kills off physical media, emulation transforms from an alternative choice into an essential defensive wall. Emulation stands as the final barrier protecting interactive art from corporate censorship and deliberate erasure. When corporate digital storefronts eventually terminate their authentication servers, locked account libraries will disappear overnight. The optical discs that once protected those games will no longer be manufactured. At that stage, community preservation and open source emulation will be the only remaining paths to access those experiences. Game ROMs preserved on independent hardware will outlive every corporate server currently operating on Earth. Publishers want you to believe that owning your media is an obsolete relic of the past. They desire a frictionless digital system where you continuously rent permission to access pixels on a screen. Sony is spearheading this move because an all-digital platform gives them absolute power over what you play, how long you play it, and how much money they extract from you. They are actively dismantling consumer rights while hiding behind the false narrative of modern user convenience. We cannot count on anti-consumer corporations to safeguard the history of this medium. Corporate history proves that short-term financial returns will always be prioritized over artistic preservation. Buying a game does not equal actual ownership anymore. Preserving and running software through emulation becomes a necessary protective action. It is a direct defense of cultural history against relentless corporate overreach. You take a stand every time you archive a game file or run a local emulator. You reclaim control from corporate gatekeepers. You ensure that video game history remains in the hands of the players who actually care about it, stopping greedy corporate executives from monetizing it into extinction.